All right, we're in chapter 6 and we are doing fallacies. And I love fallacies. Once you get used to fallacies, you see them everywhere. And I'm going to try and do my best here to really kind of show what they are. I'm not going to describe the memes. You get to look at those as examples. I've tried to do videos where I walk through the memes and it is not pretty. It's so dumb. So I will not do that for you, but I will try and go through, or I will be going through the different fallacies for you to the best of my abilities. But honestly, take a look at the memes, take a look at the cartoons. They do a really good job. So I'm going to do my best, okay? All right, so we are going to be working on, there's two different types of fallacies. We have the inadequate reasons or insufficient reasons fallacies, and then we have a whole other load of them. So I'm going to start with those first, and those are going to be, we have false, or it'll say faulty, false analogies, false cause, we have slippery slope, straw man, hasty conclusion, false dilemma, and begging the question, okay? I'm trying to get through those as best that I can, all right? Okay, so go ahead, take a look at the memes. They're a little bit more fun than this, but I'll do my best. False analogy, it occurs when you're trying to compare two things that aren't really alike. Okay, you might say something like anti-smoking laws won't work because they're just like prohibition laws of the 1920s. Those two completely different things. They will not work. Go to page 226. You're going to see a little bit more. And take a look at some of the memes that I posted on the lecture. So, all right. So there's a significant difference between two things that people are trying to compare. So again, that false or faulty analogy means you're trying to compare two things that really aren't anything alike. Like feminism and Nazism, like in the meme. Like those are two completely different things. You can't compare them because you can't compare them. And that's what makes it a faulty analogy. So sometimes you'll see this in ads. In the book, it shows Spring Soft fabric softener as an example. It smells great. It's like hanging your clothes out in fresh air. But it's two completely different things. Like, so we're going to compare and show you how doing that comparison, that false analogy, does not compute. So Spring Soft, first of all, it doesn't smell like fresh air because the smells are chemically induced, right? So if you're hanging your clothes out to dry, you're actually getting that fresh air smell. If you do Spring Soft, there's also a cost involved. While if you just hang your clothes, you don't. Well, I mean, except for the one-time line cost. The clothesline, and then the soft, what do you call it? Spring Soft is actually quicker time. While when you hang your clothes out to dry, it's more time consuming. So they're trying to compare two things that really aren't the same. The idea is really that Spring Soft is using the chemicals to make it smell like you hung it out to dry. So anyway, you'll see a lot of stuff like that when it comes to advertising, and when we get there, you'll see it even more. So I'll give you a couple examples. I watched TV shows all the time when I was a kid, and I turned out just fine. That's comparing your childhood to someone else's childhood 30, 40 years later. That's not going to compute. That's completely different. Like for me, I grew up, I didn't have a computer, I didn't have tablets, didn't have internet. Like I remember when the internet came about, we're like, whoa, what is this, man? Like when email, like email. I remember when I heard Hotmail for the first time, and I was like, oh, Hotmail. I thought it was like inappropriate stuff. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. Anyway, I don't know. So that's what internet was for me. So my childhood would be wildly different from someone else. Like, the comparing my childhood to someone else, not going to be the same. Okay. So anyway, when you hear people try and go, well, when I was a kid, when I was your age, it's like, well, things have changed, and we just have to recognize that. So those are two very faulty analogies. All right, so I didn't have to study or take notes, and I got an A. I didn't have to study, I didn't have to take notes. I did just fine. Well, I mean, if you take any of my other classes, you recognize that literacy is about experience, things that maybe you have experience in this subject that someone else doesn't. Like you didn't have to study because maybe you've done something similar before in your life, versus someone else. So, we're not accounting for previous knowledge or abilities compared to another person, so you can't put those together. You can't compare me to you and my ability or not need to study versus someone else who needs to study who doesn't have the experience. So, all right, faulty analogy. When someone is supporting a position by comparing one idea, one situation, or a plan to another, try and stop and evaluate whether or not the comparison is valid, right? So if someone's trying to compare two things and it doesn't kind of sit right, pause and go, how are those two things even remotely close? And usually if you're having the pause, that's probably because it's a faulty analogy. There's no comparison. Okay. My favorite one, the one with Sheldon, is post hoc ergo propter hoc. I love that. So the idea between post hoc ergo propter hoc is after the fact, therefore because of the fact. Okay. One of my favorite, one of the memes is the Family Circus one where the kid's in an airplane and it's shaking, right? He's hitting turbulence. And the seatbelt sign obviously goes on. And so the kid goes, I wish they didn't turn on the seatbelt sign so much. Every time they do, it gets bumpy. Well, that's post hoc ergo propter hoc. The assumption is that when the light goes on, it gets bumpy. Well, they turn on the light knowing that it's going to be bumpy, right? So the idea is after the fact, therefore, before, because of the fact. So let's think of another one like every time I picked up a penny, the sun would set. So I make sure I pick up a penny so the sun will set. Well, picking up the penny has nothing to do with the sun setting, right? Okay, let's see. So the post hoc ergo propter hoc creates that false cause effect relationship, assuming that since one thing happened first, it caused the thing to happen second. Okay, therefore you won the lottery in the afternoon because you found a lucky horseshoe in the morning, right? Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, you might also call that coincidence. Okay, all right. So you can go through the memes. Some of them work, some of them kind of don't. So post hoc ergo propter hoc is also known as false cause. Okay, so the false cause occurs when there's no real proof that one event caused another. Okay, the only evidence is that one occurred after the other. That's the only thing. That could just, again, be pure coincidence. So there's a causation and a correlation. So correlation is a connection between two objects or events. A correlation. If there's no correlation, then it's not an actual causation. Let me rephrase that. Okay, so a connection between two objects or events is a correlation. So noting a correlation is sometimes the first step in exploring a causation. Okay, but it doesn't equate or equal a causation. So correlation does not equate causation. And causation is a connection between two events in which it is established that one event caused the other, right? So causation is it actually caused it to happen versus correlation, that there is a connection, but it could just be a coincidence, okay? So just keep that in mind. Oftentimes this is, okay, your first thought is probably superstition, right? So that's what we're thinking of when we think of post hoc ergo propter hoc is superstitious very often. So maybe being lucky or cursed. I used to find a penny, right side up, all good day, you'll have good luck. I used to think of that one. It creates a way of acting that could then create said superstitions to come true. So if I'm thinking, and there is some data to be, that can prove that, some positive thinking does create positive reactions, and that could just be our mindset, the way we see something, the way we act. So if we find a penny right set up, we're in a positive mood. We start seeing the positive things happen. It's kind of like if you're like in a bad mood, you're like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. So that's what we're looking at here. Correlation, not necessarily causation. All right, so oftentimes people will use this to blame others for certain things that have happened. Politicians do this very often. I didn't get us into this mess. They say that very often. Doesn't matter. People just, one side or the other, whatever. All right, or even using it to take credit, like, I'm the reason why the economy is so great after only being in office for a few weeks, right? Which would be impossible to get economy going in just a couple weeks. So they might, blaming is an ad hoc fallacy, which creates more issues and reasons, and the reasoning ignores the more complicated factors that need to be understood in order to change the situation for the better. So the problem with post hoc, again, is not recognizing the true causation and correlation, okay? So an example would be, the reason our team lost is because we weren't playing at home, or I failed the class because the teacher hated me, or I saw how you put your television set in the car. It's the reason it doesn't work, or the reason why it doesn't work is because it was poorly placed in your car after it was, after it left the repair shop, right? I'm sure that sounds familiar to some people. Or, I ate 3 pieces of pie at Joanne's house because I didn't want to hurt her mother's feelings. Well, You're using blame. You just wanted the pie. It's okay. We all like pie. I like it. I don't love it. Anyway, I can't find my soccer ball because, and this might sound familiar if you have children, I can't find my soccer ball because a large green and brown monster came and ate it while I was sleeping, right? Kids very often use post hoc ergo propter hoc to explain things in this world, explain away stuff, okay? Sometimes we just don't know the real answer to the problem, right? We talk about, when we were talking about earlier in chapter 5, yes, we were talking in chapter 5, expert testimony and what's his name with the big hair, because aliens, right? We don't have an answer, so we just say aliens, okay? All right, so we give reasons why, so for false cause or ergo, post hoc ergo propter hoc, sometimes we don't know the real answer. So giving reasons why we have homelessness or social issues. We don't really have an issue, so we'll blame something somewhere. We'll say this is the causation when in reality there is no correlation. Why we want to believe in aliens, because aliens. Why we believe in superstitions and conspiracies. Very, very often the reason why conspiracies get where they're at and why they're so far out there is we just don't have an answer, or maybe the answer doesn't make sense to us, or maybe it's not the answer we want to hear. So we will use the conspiracies to come up with our rationale as to why something is the way it is, okay? Or other times we use it as a blaming game for fear of being found out, blaming others for our shortcomings or our inability to answer the question. And again, politicians use ad hoc all the time. And I throw this out there because when it's election seasons, keep in mind, keep your ears open for these fallacies. You'll hear them very often. Begging the question's a big one. We'll get into a few in a little bit. Slippery slope is a huge one, especially when we're trying to make, because we're getting into slippery slope right now, especially when they're trying to make reasons why certain laws should not be passed. Do they go to this real extreme, example of what would happen if certain laws get passed, or whatever, something like that. Some of them are actual. Some of them, it sounds like a slippery slope, and you're like, actually, that does happen if you make this law or this rule, right? So it's really important, again, to listen to the experts and how we know, the consequences of actions. That's one thing we want to think about. So anyway, slippery slope. Slippery slope suggests that if an action is taken, it will be the first step in a continuous path towards an inevitable end, right? It's just this slippery slope, right? If you let them turn in one late paper, they'll never learn any discipline, and they'll end up never being able to hold down a serious job. That's quite extreme for turning in late paperwork. I don't know what happens after I let you turn in late paperwork. Maybe you do end up never holding down a job because of that. But it seems rather extreme, right? Sometimes things happen. Sometimes we need to turn in papers late. Doesn't mean that it is going to be the end of your careers as you move forward. So, okay. Take a look at the memes on that one. They do a really good job, I think, personally. Maybe because, some of them I like. Some of them I didn't really have the best example, but I wanted something, right? But Slippery Slope does a really good job. So take a look at that, especially when they talk about the different, like Roe versus Wade in 1973 when it first got passed. Now that abortion is illegal, we're certain to make it legal to commit an infanticide any year now, right? And so that's extreme. Since 1973, that was not the case at all. It was not. That's not two totally different things, right? That's also a false analogy, comparing two things that are absolutely nothing alike. Virginia versus Loving versus Virginia in 1967 is just you watch now that black can marry white people. White marrying house pets is just around the corner, right? Two people of unique or different cultures and diversities getting married will not lead to people marrying their pets. That's two completely different things. So anyway, that's how you can see how it's a slippery slope and a false analogy, right? Comparing two things that are not alike. There's a reason why I don't read these memes. It's embarrassing. I'm just trying to use some examples. So forgive me. That's why I didn't want to do it. Okay. Again, slippery slope as a fallacy occurs when serious consequences of a potential action or policy are predicted but not substantiated by evidence. Okay, like when we talked before, we need the data. Show me the data, right? Before we make these generalizations, I need to see how that is actually going to happen. And in the many years that we've had these things in place, That has not been the case. Okay, we have not had people marrying house pets. Okay, and abortion did not lead to infanticide, right? Like, I know I'm saying that word wrong. Work with me here. Okay, so I have a friend, and this is like during COVID. There was a lot of panic and stuff, and his statement to me as we were talking was a slippery slope. And so his example was, first we self quarantine, next thing you know, we'll be martial lawed. Next, we're going to end up with chips in our arms and monitored daily. This is the end of times. Everything is going to be changed. We're screwed. He literally said that to me. Love him, love him. That was not a, this is not a, it's a valid fear for him to have because we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like that was, that makes sense that he could completely assume the absolute worst. But the reality was it did not happen. But that was a very slippery slope he went through from, just like, hey, y'all, just stay at home real quick while we try and get through this, to it becoming, chips in our arms. Again, that's just an example of a slippery slope. Next, we have straw man. So straw man is a fallacy that sets up a weak or a negative argument, right? So we're setting up a weak or a negative argument that claims that an argument and claims that is held by an opponent. So I'm sorry, I'm distracted because in my head I'm seeing a straw man in a boxing ring, and that's what I think, right? We use someone's argument, we kind of turn it into something else so we make it easy to knock down. Okay, that's my distraction there. So I'll try and see if I can do a little bit better at explaining that. Okay, so the fallacies were setting up a weak or negative argument and claims that is held by an opponent. Subconsciously misrepresenting the opponent's views to make it easier to attack. We're misrepresenting what they're saying in order to make them easier to attack. And again, you're going to see this anytime there's debates, any kind of politic thing. They do that all the time because they're trying to make you see the candidate as weak when in reality they're actually turning their words around against them, but not actually against them. They're just trying to make it look like it's a weak argument. Those words did not come out the way I wanted. Work with me here. The fallacies are always really hard to kind of explain, but when you see him, you're like, oh, that's a straw man, right? He made his argument weaker so that he can attack that argument. And let me give you examples. So please don't hate me for these. Okay, so as an example would be the president wants us to have healthcare program that is just like those of countries that are socialist. I will always stand against socialism taking over our country, right? So how he turned that around based on this idea that a healthcare program is socialism, right? And so then he's like, he just wants us to be socialists. Like, hold on, wait, how did you do that? So he turned it around so that he can make the argument weaker, when in reality, the question isn't about socialism. The question or the statement is based on healthcare, okay? Be mindful of that, because that's what happens often when people are having arguments. They turn them around on you, and so that way you're confused. You're like, oh, yeah, no, I hate socialism. It's like, that's not what we were talking about, though. So just speak, right? Just be very mindful in the ways in which people are having arguments. One of my favorite, I'm going to try and read a meme with Calvin and Hobbes. And Calvin's talking to his dad, right? And Calvin's got his baseball bat with him. He's like, Dad, can you get my ball out of the gutter again? And his dad says, this is the third time this afternoon. I thought I told you to play in the back. And Calvin goes, relax, Dad. It's just a ball in the gutter. It's not as if I've been embezzling money or killing people, right? Aren't you glad I'm not stealing or murdering? All right. And of course, Calvin follows up with, I always have to help Dad establish the proper context. So what he did then was, again, straw man. He tried to make a weaker part of the bigger argument. Well, I'm not doing this. When in reality, that's not the point of the argument. The argument is, I told you not to get the ball in the gutter. And you got the ball in the gutter. Like, that's just the argument. What Calvin did, again, was straw man, bending his words to where it made a weaker argument, okay? Again, straw man, a fallacy in which opponent's argument is distorted or exaggerated and then more easily attacked. So, yeah, I think that's an easier way of saying it. And this is my favorite. Imagine there's a boxer in a ring with two opponents. One opponent is a real live human and the other is made of straw. The boxer knocks out the straw man opponent, and declares victory while the real opponent just stands there going, what? And I love the Calvin and Hobbes examples, because the argument is about whether or not you got that ball in the gutter. And Calvin turns around and is like, oh, I'm not embezzling money and I didn't murder anybody, so you should just be happy. And it's like, that's not the argument that we're having. The argument on the issue. The issue is getting your, did you get your ball stuck in the thing? I told you not to. Got it stuck in the gutter, right? So the issue is the ball in the gutter, not whether or not Calvin has done worse things as a son. So, straw man. So we do, the other thing would be AK-47. So an example would be AK-47 should be outlawed. This would be someone's argument. If AK-47 should be outlawed, no one needs that much firepower to be protected. That's the argument. I'm going to set that right there. Now here's somebody's rebuttal to that. The straw man argument would be, my opponent is against the use of firearms for self-protection. Okay, now we've just changed the argument. Okay, created something out of nothing. That's not what they're saying. They're just saying that nobody needs that much firepower for an AK-47. So strawman argument is, my opponent is against the use of firearms for self-protection, and so she would allow criminals to possess firearms and deny their use by law-abiding citizens. How does that have anything to do with we don't need the AK-40. We don't need that big of a gun. You can have guns, just maybe not something that's going to take out many, many people in one sitting. It's unnecessary, right? So all it is about guns. The argument wasn't for all guns. It's just AK-47. So anyway, when we think of these sorts of things, when we talk about straw man, you'll see that very often in rebuttals where someone tries to manipulate the thing, and it's like, that's not even what the argument is about. Be very mindful. Try and keep, when we talk, I don't know if we've covered emotions. We did, when emotions get involved, right? So we're trying to pull away from the emotions, and that's where straw man comes in. People will feed into the emotion of the argument rather than the actual facts of the argument. That's how they get you. So the second you start feeling emotional on a thing, you're like, ooh, I think you've pulled a fallacy on me. It feels like straw man. Go back, take a look at what the true argument is about. Okay, hasty conclusions or hasty generalizations. You'll see hasty generalizations mostly. All right, it presumes that a general principle is applicable to all, every case, right? This is stereotyping as well. Not all A's are B's, right? I know we talked about that before, where in chapter, 4 or 5, where there is, like, you can do not hasty generalizations, you can do statistical generalizations. Statistical generalizations are when you get statistical data, when you get the evidence, when you get all this information, you can set it down and go, okay, I can actually now make a generalization based on the statistical evidence that I have. Now, a hasty generalization doesn't even look at that. It just generalizes for the sake of generalizing. Like, you might assume one dog bit you, now all dogs will bite you. That's a hasty generalization. In fact, what do you know? That's the example here. Since a Doberman Pinscher bit you when you were a kid, you claim Doberman Pinschers bite, right? One assumes the whole. Well, hasty generalization, not all assume the whole, or not one does not assume the whole. God, I hope I'm not confusing you guys. All right. So anyway, just think about that. You can take a look at the memes. That'll help you. The one where it's like, where do students sit in the semester? My hasty generalization would be based on where you sit in my class is how I assume you are as a person. And that could be because one semester, one person sat there in that seat, and then I assumed all students who sat in that seat are that way. Okay. Like if you sit in the front, you're the teacher's pet. My ex used to sit up front because they have bad eyes. Or some students might have to sit up front because they can't hear very well. Or if you're like me, all of it, I can't hear, see, I get distracted. You put me in the back and I'm like, ooh, something shiny. Like, just put me in the front so I'm like focused, okay? Maybe, if you're sitting in the back, you're too cool, or you just want to bail if you're sitting by the door. I'm not saying it's not true, but it would be a hasty generalization to assume all, okay? Again, hasty conclusions or generalizations is drawn from a small and thus inadequate sample of information, right? We need more. Me assuming because of one student or one person or one dog assumes the whole is incorrect. One does not assume the whole. That's my favorite line. I don't know why. Oh, what do you know? It's there too. I'm looking at my notes as we talk. That's why. So again, you can assume especially as I bring up politics a lot because that's where a lot of fallacies where we come from, where when they're talking to us, fallacies pop up a lot. And one of which would assume all Democrats are one way. All Republicans are one way. When you hear someone's a Republican, you're like, oh, I hate them. Or they're Democrats, like, oh, I hate them. Like, it's a thing now. I don't know how much it was when I was growing up. I don't recall it feeling that way. I felt like there was like It could be either way. Y'all, they're politicians. You know, they're all the same. Doesn't matter what side they're on. Everybody has an agenda. Majority of the time, it's money. We're just going to be honest with it. So that's at least for the politician side. So for your aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters and friends, that might be a different story. But just keep in mind that, you know, not all Democrats are woke and bleeding hearts and all that stuff. And, you know, not all Republicans are, you know, conservative and stingy or whatever the thing is that we assume them to be. All right. Some people just have just a choice in voting because we live in America and we get a choice in voting. Okay. Anyway, so I say this because when people take a stand or a claim based on limited evidence, that is a hasty generalization. And it's also heartbreaking because when we have these mindsets towards, especially, you know, maybe someone's political party, it gets in the way of us understanding someone else's point of view, because we get really like sidetracked in an assumption that one assumes the whole. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So if you can recall back when we did the video about the scientists making the assumptions about the rats, right? That was a hasty generalization. And about how, you know, when they had those hasty generalizations with these rats, it actually changed the outcome of how the rats performed. So what happens is when we have hasty generalizations about people, again, you know, that also leads to stereotyping and things like that. It changes the way people act and react to us. So it's actually kind of a pretty dangerous, you know, type of, you know, way of thinking and being and reacting. It also can be self-fulfilling prophecies when we have these generalizations towards other people, places, or things. Same thing. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a process whereby an expectation becomes a reality. You can also put that to post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? Where, you know, we pick up this lucky penny, and because of that, we have a new mindset. We look at things differently. In some ways, it's positive. We're like, oh, everything's great. Versus you can also do the same with a negative outlook towards things, okay? It's important not to assume that these hasty generalizations are true, okay? And instead, make sure you investigate the truth. You look at statistical data. You look at more things, right? And that's not to say maybe, you know, certain political opponents or whatever, you know, are a certain way, but not all, right? Not all. It's important to get to understand individuals as they are versus just who they are as a, you know, Democrat or Republican. Okay, don't limit yourselves or others based on these generalizations, and check the quality of sources in which this information came from. If you're getting it from a news source, doesn't matter which news source, if you've seen it on TV, it's probably bullshit, because they base it on ratings, they base it on emotional reactions that they're going to get from you. I don't care which news station you're watching, it's called sensationalism, and they all strive for it. That's what news is about right now. So I would say if you can, take a step back from any of that when you're getting your information. I do really like New York Times because I feel like it's as close as we can get to as neutral as we can get for news. They try very hard to keep it that way. So if you have other suggestions, let me know. I know BBC was one that was good in covering American politics because it's not in America, so that kind of, but it's still sensationalism. It's all sensationalism. So yeah, good luck out there. So in other words, look at who's sending it. Are you trying to get you to react a certain way by fear? Are they trying to get you to react a certain way because they get money for it, like all the clicking, all the little ads? Yes, that's the answer. Yes. Okay, here we go. False dilemma. We also call this the either-or fallacy, where it assumes that an issue only has two sides, when in fact, most issues have more than just two sides, okay? When you hear that your friend failed a math test that you found very easy, you could say either you didn't study or you don't have an aptitude for math. Well, that's not the case. Maybe they studied really hard. Maybe they have an incredible aptitude for math. Maybe, if they're like me, they have anxieties, and when it comes to a test, your whole body shuts down. Maybe there's other factors. Maybe something happened the night before. Maybe they were sick. We don't know. Either or fallacies are still fallacies. I remember during 9/11, there was the America, love it or leave it, right? You're either for America, you're against us. No, that's not the case. That's not the case at all. There's always multiple factors to things, so it's important to recognize that. One of the other memes is either you love bacon or you're wrong. Right? Okay, so, or the other, life is a roller coaster. You either scream every time you hit a bump or you throw your hands up in the air and enjoy it. Y'all, I've lived a lot of life and it is not that easy. Okay. All right, again, false dilemma. It's an error in reasoning that occurs when we polarize a situation by presenting only two alternatives, okay? Two extremes of the possibilities when there's a lot in the middle, okay? You will see this a lot out there. Be very mindful when it feels extreme. It's usually extreme. When you're having an emotional reaction, it's because that's the intent. There's always gray, so always look for the gray. Examples on 237, all right, page 237. Why it's so easy to make this kind of erroneous reasoning is because we like to think that solutions are clear cut. Why? We watch a lot of TV. TV gets everything all hunky-dory in about 30 minutes. Not the case, not how real life is. A simple solution saves us time and effort in understanding all the complexities of a situation. Okay, so it's really important to be mindful when something pops up. It's not always A, it's not always B. Sometimes it's something in the middle. All right. Also, we're going to take a look at our language. Our language, unfortunately, encourages polarizing of thinking, okay, including very few words describing the middle ground. So, like we have beautiful and we have ugly. What's in between that? Beautiful and ugly. What's in between? Like, if you can tell me, help me, right? We've got strong, we've got weak, but we don't have that in between. Extroverted, introverted, brave, cowardly, happy, sad. What can you, take a second and sit and try and figure out what are some middle words in there that can help you understand what's something in the middle of these words. And you're going to have a hard time because that's how we like to put things. And in human minds, we also like to put things in a box for our categories and boxes just to kind of help us think. And unfortunately, when we do that, it separates us. And then anyone left who's not ugly or not beautiful, we're in the middle going, what the hell are we doing now? I don't know. I don't fit anywhere. All right. Creates a lot of chaos. Okay. Begging the question. Begging the question. Another very political, fallacy, right? A lot of times people do this very often where the results are when you present a debatable question, right? I say debatable. That's why it pops up. It's something that you'll see a lot in debates. It's a debatable question as if it were a fact, okay? Usually buried within a larger argument. Here's an example. An immoral book such as Huckleberry Finn must be removed from our school's library because it will corrupt young minds. Okay? The term immoral is presented as if it were already an established fact. Okay? Be mindful of those things, especially when people talk about book banning that's going on right now. There's a lot of that. Again, using words like immoral, assuming immoral is a fact towards Huckleberry Finn or immoral towards other books, okay? That's not the fact, but that's how they're presenting it, and that is how you're begging the question. There's also a couple little memes that help, and I think begging the question, one of the ways in which they do that is the Winnie the Pooh meme is a really good one. And let's see. There's the one where the guy's at the top of the mountain and he's talking to the guru and he says, "You mean I do the hokey pokey and I turn myself around and that's what it's all about?" Right? That's, I guess, begging the question, right? So fallacy occurs when the speaker, the writer, assumes what needs to be proven, okay? 239 and 240 will give you some much better examples as well. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to explain it and it's not coming off the way I want. So the book will probably do a better job for you. Okay, so the speaker makes a claim and then asks you to prove his or her claim is not correct. Prove to me it's not correct. This is why, Thank You for Smoking. Nick Naylor did a really good job about this too, right? The way he would argue. He could do a lot of begging of the question. So why wouldn't you call the 1-800-DENTIST to get the best professional care? Advertising does this a lot. Why wouldn't you call? You're going to get the best care. It's begging the question, okay? Building an unproven assumption in their argument as if it were fact, okay? Think about that. Again, immoral as if that were fact. An example would be, have you stopped beating your wife? Well, why is that an example? Unproven assumption in their argument as if it were fact. Wow. Okay. I don't know why that is in there, but anyway, apparently that's my example. I don't like it. This must be an old slide. Anywho, we're going to go on to the next. That was a terrible example. Let's do Winnie the Pooh and kind of go in a different route. Okay, Winnie the Pooh's talking to Piglet as they're looking for a map. Winnie the Pooh says, "The map says we start at the big oak tree." Winnie the Pooh says that, and then Piglet's all excited. And Winnie the Pooh says, "Well, we walk 12 steps this way and 6 steps that way until we come to the gorse bush." And then they get there, and Pooh says, "This is where the map says the pirates buried the treasure." And Piglet's like, "I don't see it." And Piglet goes, "Are you sure this is the right place, Pooh?" Piglet's like, "Of course I'm sure, Piglet. I'm the one who made up the map, didn't I?" Stupid. Okay, anyway. Let's move on to fallacies that mislead. Okay, this is going to be our second half of fallacies. Fallacies that lead the listener away from the real or the primary issue at hand. Okay, we've got red herring, ad hominem, two wrongs make a right, ad populum, appeal to tradition, appeal to pity, and equivocation. All right, these ones are a little bit easier because you can see how they're deceiving, like how they're misleading you. All right, red herring, super easy to remember this one. It's a move of desperation, right? We're trying to distract you with something over here. I know I'm saying this, but look over here while my hand does this. That's a red herring. Okay, the idea is when a writer or the person speaking changes the subject to divert the reader or the listener's attention away from the weakness of his or her argument. Yes, my candidate has no experience in politics, but she's the daughter of a former U.S. president, and her pictures with him are just so cute. Aren't they just so cute? Right? Versus the issue at hand, which is she has absolutely no experience, right? Ta-da. Okay. You could also do the same. Calvin and Hobbes does the same thing. By the way, red herring, I often see students do this. In fact, when you use AI does this, where they say a lot, but they don't say anything at all, right? Trying to distract me, I guess the reader or whoever your readers are, from the actual issue at hand by using big words, the red herring, all the things. Okay. And so let's see here. Let's see. Just look at the memes. They're fine. All right. So there's the meme about homeopathy. The one great thing about homeopathy is that because the remedies don't actually do anything, there's no need for worrying about nasty side effects. So I don't know if that's, I don't know. That's just, the idea is that it doesn't work. Okay, anyway, blah, blah. These are not beliefs that I have. These are literally just memes that I'm trying to use as examples, okay? All right. Okay, so red herring, it's also when people, like when you're in the middle of an argument and someone tries to correct your grammar and you're like, that's not the point of the argument. Okay, red herring, fallacy in which reasons offered to support conclusions lead the listener away from the issue that is under consideration. Okay, we're trying to do this little thing. And the reason why this one stands out to me, and you'll remember this as maybe I do, where the term comes from a technique that was used to distract hunting dogs using smoked fish, like red herring, the actual fish, to throw off the hunting, like you throw it off and it distracts the hunting dogs who are following a scent. It's like, ooh, go get that puppy, right? As you run off, run away. All right, so kids are really good at doing this very often. An example would be, let's see here. Kids are fantastic using this form of argument as a defense mechanism against parental demands. So that's on page 241 and 242. Take a look at those are some examples. I don't need to read you the book. You can read the book on your own. Just work with me here. Okay, ad hominem, which is attacking the person, okay? So ad hominem attacks the person rather than the actual issue. Again, politicians do this all the time, blah, blah, blah. The governor supports higher emission standards for automobiles. What else would you expect from a has-been movie star, right? I'm sure that was probably somebody attacking Ronald Reagan or something like that, or whatever. Okay, so that's, in other words, these are the ways. They're not attacking the argument, they're attacking the person, okay? Actually, that would not be a Ronald Reagan thing. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I like sometimes put these examples and they make sense in my head and I go back to them. I'm like, why did I do that? Please take a look at the memes. Those will help you. Again, attacking the person is an ad hominem. Okay. To the man. That's the Latin version. What it's trying to say is to the man, pointing to the other person. So, attacking the other person versus the actual argument. It occurs when a person is attacked on the personal quality that is irrelevant to the issue under discussion. Okay, so ad hominem. When you hear ad hominem, think of like, you're fighting the person. I don't know why that pops in my head when I think that. I think of attacking the person. Anyway, All right, so let's get into tu quo, which is two wrongs make a right. And we all know this one by heart. What's his name? Pee Wee Herman used to do that. I know you are, but what am I, right? It's back at you. Tu quo, back at you. It occurs when you avoid addressing an issue or a hostile charge by making a similar charge against your opponent. Don't tell me I need to lose weight. You need to quit smoke, or you smoke, right? So I know you are, but what am I? Okay. Take a look again at the memes. They're pretty good. They do a fine enough job. All right, so tu quo is a fallacy that uses to excuse bad behavior on the grounds of the other person's bad behavior. All right, it occurs when someone rationalizes, don't forget 51 to 53, rationalizes that one person's or one group's action is justified because some other person or group's action is just as bad, right? So 246 and 247 are going to give you an example of that. Again, to excuse bad behavior for that one, you can't blame me for going out when you're moody all the time. Oh, right? Cheating on someone because they're not giving you enough, that kind of thing, I guess. Why do I get a ticket when there are at least 3 other people who are going faster than I was? Or they did it first, why am I getting in trouble? I grew up with siblings, so that was our go-to line. All right, justifying bad behavior for legitimate reasons. Sometimes it's not so much a fallacy as it is justified, legitimate. Anyway, all right, taking money out of the cash register because you're being robbed, okay? So I had to finish that sentence, right? You had to take it out because you're being robbed, right? That's normally you don't take the money out of the cash register for yourself, but when someone's put a gun to your head, you kind of have to do it. Or pushing someone who's about to get hit by a car. You don't normally push somebody, but all right. Anyway, so a lot of times the look who's talking will be kind of like the argument as well. Denying a claim because they think that the speaker who's making the claim is hypocritical. All right. Why should I listen to you? Heard that very often. Or you did it when you were my age, right? I'm imagining you could say that to parents, right? Or it's valid to point out hypocritical behavior. So why is the teacher so concerned about us being late when she's late all the time? Or unfair or not, there's no point in being late if it's going to affect your grade, right? So unfortunately, when you want to point out to someone else, it doesn't justify your bad behavior. So I try not to be late I'm never late for class. Are you kidding me? I'm like an hour and a half early. So, but anyway, most of the time when I'm in person, I'm pretty good about that stuff. Okay, so bandwagon or ad populum is another one. So the bandwagon or ad populum fallacy says that it attempts to establish that something is true or worthy simply because many people believe it is. Okay, everybody's doing it. How often have we heard that? Okay. The speed limit in Paradise should be raised to 45 miles per hour because everybody drives that fast anyway. Everybody does drive that fast. So I think it's at 25 right now. I don't know. It's been a while. So anyway, but yeah, everyone's doing it anyway. All right. We have the meme where it says, put me down for whoever comes out ahead in your poll, right? Everyone else is doing it. Why don't I? Zits is another good meme. Take a look at that. Or a comic. I use comics too. Okay. Or the lemmings that are running off the edge of the cliff. Liz says, Liz, if Liv told you not to jump off the bridge, not to jump off a bridge, would you do it? The joke is lemmings go off the cliff. I want to look into why that is. I think I looked into that once and I forget why. Anyway, ooh, shiny. Okay, so again, ad populum, bandwagon fallacy is a fallacy that consists of a false appeal to authority, right? We're appealing to authority of everyone. Everyone's the authority here. The fallacy is based on the assumption that a course of action should be taken or ideas should be supported because everyone is doing it or everyone believes it. Be mindful with whether it's a political party or a conspiracy or whatever the thing might be, that just because everyone's doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. Okay, so just be cognizant of that. This is critical thinking class. I'm just trying to open up your minds a little bit. Just think a little differently, right? Just because it's aliens doesn't mean it's aliens, right? Okay. All right. If you need more, go to page 248 for that. And now we're going to do appeal to tradition. Appeal to tradition. This one happens very often, especially within maybe families. It's cultural sometimes. That's important though. Anyway, so it's appeal tradition. We've always done it this way. The fallacy occurs when when a belief or action is supported on the ground that it conforms with traditional ideas or practices. Okay, so it's fallacious would be the statement to say, well, we've always done it this way. We're appealing to action. When sometimes continuously doing the thing that you've been doing at this point might not be right. We've either learned more about what we shouldn't do, or who knows what it is. So just keep that in mind when you think of appeal to tradition. It doesn't, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we should continue to do it that way. All right, an appeal to pity. Oh, poor me. You should appeal to me because poor me. That's kind of what that's going for. It's used to win an argument by preying on someone's sympathy. Again, when someone's pulling at your heartstrings and pulling at your emotions, that's an appeal to pity. Okay, or guilt, right? Rather than making a logical argument, they're appealing to those parts of you. So I wasn't able to open the assignments on Canvas because we didn't have money to pay our electric bills and our power was cut off. That is an appeal to pity. I'm not saying it doesn't suck. That totally sucks. But that's an appeal to pity, right? Versus just looking for alternatives on how you can get back onto Canvas to do that. So, but sometimes life sucks, and sometimes that isn't necessarily appeal to pity. It's the we didn't have money to pay the bills would be the appeal to pity, but not having electricity is a true statement. So that's kind of a wishy-washy one. I don't know if I like that one. Let's see. Appeal to pity. You could say somebody who's got a sign where it's like, someone's sitting on the street and they say, "Oh, I've got my dog and my cat and I need money," I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. Appeal to pity is a really tough one. Let's see if we can do better examples. Look on 250 and 251. But it occurs when someone argues that others should follow a course of action or hold a certain belief for no other reason than it should feel compassion for the irrelevant claims or irresponsibility of the speaker. So if I were, and I'm going to use an example, like say I'm an alcoholic and I'm drinking my house away and I'm doing all these things, I'm an addict, and I use that as an appeal to why you should do more things for me. It's like, well, I'm an addict, I need help. Unfortunately, that's an appeal to pity because of my irresponsibility in my actions. Not that I'm an alcoholic, but that I use all my money to buy alcohol and I'm not paying my bills. That's the irresponsibility aspect of it, right? So the irresponsibility on my half, but I'm like, but I'm an alcoholic, I don't know how else to be, right? That's me using the appeal to pity for you to take an action to either help me or, have a certain belief. So we just have to be mindful in how someone might be using certain dialogue. Let's see. Equivocation. Equivocation is going to be our last one here. It occurs when you shift the meaning of a key term, right? That's the thing we want to make be mindful of here, in the middle of an argument to make your conclusion appear or follow logically from your actual premise. Remember, we talked about premises, our main premise to get to a conclusion. Enthemy might kind of come into mind when you think of this. For an example, in the realm of human experience, we find ourselves presented with difficult choices to make. It is then a very human experience to make the mistake that my client did. All right, do you see that? They use the key term of difficult choices, right, as the key term that they're going to flip around to explain away how the client did what the client did, okay? A fallacy in which the same word is used with two different meanings. So when we're thinking equivocations, we can think of equal, but they're not really equal. They just have two different meanings. Same word, different meanings, okay? So this hurts me a lot more than it hurts you, right? You're getting the good old spanking, and they say hurt. Well, that's the emotional hurt versus the physical hurt, which these are two different things right here. Hurts me a lot more than it hurts you. All right. The word hurt is used as both a physical and emotional pain, but is acting as if they're the same, but they are not the same. All righty. So, all right. That's it. That was a lot. We're running on 50 minutes, and you know what? We just gotta do what we gotta do. So hopefully that helped you. Please take a look at the book. That's gonna give you even better examples than I did. I try. It's hard when you go to like 50 straight minutes of talking, y'all. I'm sure you're just hating it. So anyway, I'm gonna end this here. Go ahead and take that quiz and Good luck, have fun. Fallacies are my favorite. Try and figure out if you can find them in the things that you see as you go through your day to day.